Hello, welcome to Revelate Alpha. Hope you're all well. So, hey, coming live at you. Saturday morning here in the UK. No, sorry, apologies. Saturday afternoon. It's 20 to 1. I thought I'd come and do a live show. I haven't done a live show in a long time. I thought I'd talk about all the bikes for 2026. Well, not all the bikes, but sort of news and what potentially could come in, but also really talking about Harley Davidson. If you like what I do here, if you like the channel, if you like the videos, then hey, keep on watching. And if you want to subscribe and do all that kind of stuff, please do. But keep on watching. And if you enjoy the live shows more than videos, let me know in the comments below, or let me know in the chat as well, if you're watching now or watching later. But really, I suppose in this video or this live show, I really wanted to touch on the new bikes of 2026. What are your general impressions? Are you excited about all manufacturers? I'm talking about all manufacturers. Are you excited about what's going to come? Or are you kind of meh about the whole thing? From my point of view, I'm actually quite excited by a lot of the manufacturers, or what they've come out with, or what they've proposed they're going to come out with. The likes of what Norton are coming out with BSA, for totally different reasons. A lot of the manufacturers are producing really good 200, 300, 400cc bikes in the region of about £3,000-4,000, dollars, shekels, whatever you want to call it. I really like that. I really like the fact that there are manufacturers who are not saying, no, we can only produce expensive bikes. We're going to produce other bikes. We're going to produce bikes that people can afford. But the flip side to that is obviously the manufacturers, or certain manufacturers, are still going to be selling big, expensive bikes. And those are ones that you want to aspire to, right? Certainly as you get older as well. You might think, wow, I really want a big BMW bike. I really want a big Indian bike, a big Honda, whatever. Incidentally, Honda have just come out with new specs, new variations on their Africa Twin for 2026. They'd already released quite a lot of information for their previous bikes as well, but this is something new for them. And I would expect Honda to be bringing out more. Honda, interestingly, of the last few years, have done this with their bikes or with their reveals. They haven't just gone for one big autumn reveal, as all manufacturers do, bar a couple. They've started to drip feed, or they become one of the leading pack in terms of drip feeding models throughout the year. So you don't get that big bang with Honda in terms of, look, here's all our bikes for 2026 or 2025, whatever it is. They'll say, no, look, here's our bike, and then a couple of months later, oh, here's this bike, oh, look, here's new specs, here's new colours, you know what I mean? So they keep on drip feeding, and it certainly works for Honda, of course, because they sell 20 million bikes a year, but in terms of their signature bikes, in terms of their most expensive bikes, those are the ones they're always going to want to try and promote, aren't they? But really, the bread and butter, where they earn all their money from, is from the scooters. Scooters are really popular all around Europe. They're popular over here, but more so potentially in Europe. But in the Middle East, Far East, places like that, that's where these bikes really hold their own. Honda face a lot of competition from other brands, Indian brands as well. TVS, Bajaj, Hero. Chinese brands in places like Africa and India have gone into the African market as well. So, Honda are not getting it all their own way, but they've been fighting back with producing bikes and setting up manufacturing plants in India and China and places like that to cut down costs. So these are Japanese bikes manufacturers doing this as well. So you kind of think, well, other manufacturers should be potentially following suit, right? And in some cases they have. Some cases they've shipped production to other countries, or they set up production in other countries as well. So then we take the likes of Western brands, more Western brands, the likes of BMW. Yes, they've got relationships with Indian motorcycle manufacturers to produce some of their bikes, but not all of it is sent over there. So they still suffer in terms of trying to sell, let's say the BMW RT 1300. These are expensive bikes, right? The K1600, the GS. Granted, they're not in the £40,000 level, but they're still 20 to 30 depending on the spec that you put on these bikes. Let's say average price 25,000. It's a lot of money for a lot of people. So in terms of buying new motorcycles, they're always going to find it a little bit difficult in terms of selling numbers. They'll sell the cheaper bikes, and that's what brings up their numbers. But in terms of selling mass volume of really expensive bikes, that just doesn't happen. So how do they make their money? Well, they make their money by selling less motorcycles at higher prices, right? Guess what? That's what Harley Davidson have been doing for the last 5 years or 4 years or whatever it is. They've been trying to sell more and more expensive bikes, big expensive bikes, big American tourers for more money, and that's where their profit margins are. But they've totally ignored all the other sectors. So this is kind of what happened with Harley Davidson, in that we've been expecting smaller bikes. Well, I've been trying to shout from the rooftops for years now that really they should be producing a variety of bikes, not just the cruisers, not just the tourers. And when they start bringing out the Revolution Max bikes, I thought, okay, you should develop this, do more of these bikes. I mean, if summer hits or not, then you move on, but you just don't abandon it. You keep on going with it. And then we had this sprint rumor for last year, and it never really kind of happened. Nothing's happened here. Let me just put a comment up here. Frank, hello, thank you for joining. I'll just put that up there. So it would be a good seller if HE would make the 45 today in America, 750, low, nimble, the correct entry bike. Yeah, exactly. There's lots of bikes that they could produce, and Harley Davidson are not alone here. I think there are lots of other manufacturers who could produce smaller bikes. The argument is always that in certain markets, let's just say United States, for example, because that's the biggest market for Harley Davidson in this discussion here. The argument has always been that the Americans won't buy them. They're always going to want to buy tourers. They're always going to want to buy. They're going to. Somebody put in a comment. I think Saturday actually put a comment in my video the other day, and he's basically saying, young Harley Davidson riders or would-be Harley Davidson riders, they grow up. And when they grow up, people are always getting older. They're always getting older until they reach an age where they want a Harley Davidson. That's why the company doesn't necessarily need to reduce their prices or produce smaller bikes, because people will always age out in terms of wanting fast bikes or small bikes, and they'll want to progress and rise up into buy the big bikes. I get it. Actually, that's a good argument, and I see that 100%. The question has always been, and I've always said this, is how many people are going to grow up, get older, and want to do that, want to spend their money. And we're not talking about a few thousand here. We're talking a substantial amount of money on really big bikes, right? Now, again, I've never said that overnight sales would just go down to zero. But what has been evident, the sales have been reducing. The argument has always been, from my point of view, to say, well, if you want to secure the future, you can't just rely on that one demographic who are aging out, but obviously is being replaced by people always getting older. But those people coming through are getting older are not necessarily of the same mindset that want to buy Harley Davidson or want to spend that amount of money. It's the exact same conversation that we're all having around the world, that new or young people are not necessarily wanting to rush into getting motorcycles and ride motorcycles in the numbers that they would have done in the past, because of the cost of getting your license in certain countries, the hoops that you have to jump through, and also the initial cost of riding and insurance and tax and fuel and everything like that. let alone different fashions and different trends and different things like that, what young people are facing, different options, right? Now, this is not just affecting the motorcycle space. This is actually affecting lots of other areas, lots of other industries where younger people are changing habits. I was speaking to somebody the other day, talking about alcohol, global alcohol consumption in the young has, whereas 15, 20 years ago is, in the 50, 60, 70 billion pound industry, dollar industry, whatever it is globally. Now I think it's dropped off to about 20 billion, 25 billion. I don't know those figures exactly, but it's a massive drop off. That's because younger people in general, their habits have changed. They're doing different things. Maybe they're not as interested in alcohol, but certainly maybe not be able to afford alcohol as much as they can, depending on which country you're in, right? Or it may not be the thing that you do, because you've got so many other entertainment avenues that you can have. Going out and getting pissed with your friends is not necessarily the be all and end all, right? So it affects lots of other industries, the changing guard, as it will, the changing trends. So we were expecting Harley Davidson. And, in all fairness, I was actually expecting Indian to do something this year. I'd heard a couple of things, that they had a couple of things going on, that they were going to bring out a couple of new models. And they were looking at what other manufacturers were doing, and they felt the need that they had to do something as well. So we take the likes of the Chinese brands, who are producing a lot of great bikes now, certainly coming into the European market. We take the likes of the Indian motorcycle manufacturers from India, who are producing good bikes, let alone the Japanese, right? Let alone the European brands like BMW, Triumph, who are also producing bikes and also still producing their big bikes, expensive bikes, but they've seen the light and saying, no, we've got to produce small bikes as well. I've said this in the past. If you watch my video, and if you watch my videos for probably last year, 2 years, 3 years, I've been saying repeatedly, other manufacturers have responded. Harley Davidson and Indian, you can throw them into the mix, haven't responded in terms of addressing what people are feeling or the changing trends. So when we had the Chapter 1 reveal of Harley Davidson in September, October, whatever it was, people were at that stage, I was one of them, in all fairness, were thinking, okay, we're going to hear about this new bike, right? And then when we got just the rollover bikes, especially the cruisers, and the Rev Max engine bikes, you kind of think, okay, well, this is, you made a big song and dance of this Chapter 1 reveal, and it's like, these are just carryover bikes. So basically what you're telling us, that in previous years you've never really mentioned the carryover bikes. Now you're having a big launch just for carryover bikes. So people are like, yeah, right, raised eyebrows all around, but okay, Harley, all right, we'll wait to January for your Chapter 2. But the whole time, the lead into this, we were kind of being fueled by, there's new bikes coming. There's new bikes coming. It's going to be new Harley Davidson. This is the dawn of a new era for Harley Davidson. I'm not saying that's exactly what they said, because I don't think they ever said that. I don't think they've ever said publicly to everybody in the world, look, we are bringing out a whole range of cheaper, smaller CC bikes. The Sprint we talked about. And I think people, myself included, have talked about this in principle. Okay, bringing out new bikes, cheaper bikes, whatever it is. And they've already got relationships with Chinese motorcycle manufacturers, QJ Motor. They do the X350 and the X500 in China. They already do the X440 in India, and they're new variants, right? So, you've got to look at, well, this is our expectation. The expectation that in January now, you've kind of strung us along a bit, but in January, I know you're going to tell us about these limited bikes and the Taurus and all the changes there and all the different options. The different accent pieces, the different suspension bits and pieces for the Trikes. We knew that was coming. Or most of us, some of us knew it was coming. Or, let me say this. we could predict it, right? It's not hard to predict that was going to happen. Obviously, lots of people that I knew, that I spoke to in the ether as well, we're all kind of wondering, well, what's going to become of the Road King, right? Are they going to do something with it? Put a fairing on it? Are they going to, get rid of it in completely? And then you kind of think, well, Chapter 2 comes along, they've got rid of it. And you think, okay, it's not totally unexpected. Disappointing. I would say it's disappointing, especially if you're a Road King fan, right? Disappointing. I think they could have done a lot more with that bike. I think they could have upped the engine in line with other bikes, other touring lineup. I think they could have added, just a stock, let's say, a removable fairing like you could buy afterwards. That kind of thing. Or bring out like a classic version. I think they could have revived the Road King for me. And I just don't. I think they missed an opportunity there. And maybe produce an entry-level tourer, in inverted commas, for the masses that a lot of people would still want to buy, right? And I think if you're not too sure about the styling of the Road King as a naked bike without the fairing, I think, to give it that fairing look, whatever the design of fairing would be, I'm not saying I know what the design would be, but all I'm saying is, if you give that look, then all of a sudden people go, oh, okay, great, there's an option here. Especially if you don't want, iOS or iOS, whatever the hell it's called, infotainment system and everything like that. If you want a naked bike, bare bones bike, and you want some kind of touring package, then the Road King is the way to go, right? But obviously they've gone through the whole limited thing, and some people are really, wow, this is amazing, this is the best thing I've ever seen, and other people are like going, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. I'm kind of in the middle of it in many ways. I think in my previous video, I said, look, for people who are really going to be enthusiastic about it, there's a lot to pick out. And, the ST bikes and the colours and the engine upgrades and the VVT and the 117 VVT, 121 VVT and all that sort of stuff. I think there's quite a lot for some people. However, for most people, I would imagine there's not a lot or there's not enough. That's if we're just talking in isolation about the tourers, right? For everybody else who's not really that invested in Harley Davidson, they're probably going to be scratching their heads and they're thinking, well, what's new? What's this old Chapter 2 thing going on? Let me just pick up a couple of comments here. Frank, as of today, all used trikes have lost some value due to the 2026 improvements. I hope HD makes enough the Dion kits to sell to the owners to upgrade trikes or build their own from HD bikes. See, this is what I was asking, because in all fairness, I hadn't done any research on this, Frank, and lots of people in the past have contacted me about trikes and wanted me to talk about trikes a lot more. And I've always kind of shied away from talking about trikes because I've got to say I don't think I would come with any integrity about it. It's not that I dislike trikes. In fact, I really like trikes, but I've never owned one. I think I've been on one once in the past, and that was just a quick ride up the road and back again. I don't ride them. I don't. In fact, I used to know a few people years ago who had trikes, but they were more home-built trikes. So in terms of Harley Davidson, I don't, so I'm not in a position of authority, let's say, not even authority, that's the wrong word, but you know what I mean, a position of even a little bit of knowledge to talk about it. So that's why I've kind of refrained. But I know people with trikes who watch the channel or used to watch the channel. So God bless you for watching the channel, right? But I always question, well, how many of these bikes are being sold? How many? And I did ask the question in the last video. Well, they put a lot of emphasis, a lot of time and effort in working on these bikes, improving these bikes. But I just wonder how many are being sold, which markets are really buying them. You could imagine most of these are going to be in the United States. I would say if you're selling more than 50 or 100 trikes around the world, let's say 100 trikes around the world, they would have done very well. I don't know what the figures are. I could be way off here, but I don't know what the figures are. But I just wonder why they're putting all that emphasis on, and then what's going, as Frank was saying, what's going to happen with all these bikes from previous years, and then you're saying, okay, you're going to bring these bikes with all these extras on and these refinements, which is part of motorcycle evolution, right? And every manufacturer should be doing it. But all these other Trike owners, they're kind of thinking, well, I wish I'd had those upgrades. I wish I'd had that. I wish that my bike had that. Now, it could be something that energizes them to want to go and trade in their old Trikes and buy new bikes. But again, we're talking expensive bikes, right? Now, it might be that you really love riding Trikes, and you're going to spend 50, 60,000 pounds, dollars, shekels, whatever it is, 40, 50, on a new Trike. But you would have spent that on a car. You live in a climate, let's say, that is, warm and sunny and dry most of the time. So actually, you don't care if you got a car or not, because you got, it's all year round riding weather, so it's cool, right? You're fine with it. But I just wonder where the focus of a company like Harley Davidson, whether they've got it aimed correctly, where they're targeting. Look, they had a few issues with the Trikes in terms of accidents. I discussed it on previous videos. And they had that big lawsuit against them, against the couple that came off the Trike. And I think the passenger, the pillion lady, lost her life. The small town, or from the guy from the small town, took them to court and they won. I can't remember what the final figure was, but it was in the millions. Was it 75 or was it 150 odd million? They had to pay over all their loss. I'm sure they were going to try and fight it, but the initial finding was, they were in the wrong, right? So they had to address it. They had to address the Trikes. And they've kind of made it as if, this is something new. But we know that actually the reality is they've had big problems with their Trikes. And some of the owners were having real problems with them, and dangers, and people were having accidents and losing their lives, of course. So they've had to do something about it. So from that point of view, yeah, it's great. They put a lot of emphasis on that, but I'm not sure what their rate of return is going to be for these bikes. And also, what are you actually trying to say? If we read the subtext here, the subtext for me is this. And once again, I could be way off base here, so let me know in the comments below or in the chat below. But I feel that they've doubled down on their touring bikes for the older people, the middle-aged, the 40-pluses. And now they've doubled down on the 60-plus, is the 60-year-olds and above, in terms of those with, might not have physical strength to hold it. I'm talking generally, because there's always going to be strong 80-year-olds who can hold a big heavy bike, right? Okay, just before you start tapping away, I know that. But in general terms, usually, the older you get, you get bone mass degradation or bone density degradation, muscle mass degradation. It happens, right? It's just a natural evolution of life, or natural pathway of life. So I feel that they've doubled down on that demographic who still want to be Harley Davidson, but they want to be on Trikes. And I think they're going to make it more and more appealing for people to get on Trikes. Hell, listen, I was looking at those bikes and I was thinking, you know what? I never really thought about a Trike, but do you know what? At some point, never say never. Do you know what I mean? Never say never. So I was thinking, yeah, all right. But again, it's about focus here. It's about the new direction. It's about this getting people to the brand, getting young people to the brand. And we were excited. Look, if you have to say hand on your heart, were you really that excited about Harley Davidson doing a sprint 250cc, 350cc, whatever the hell they were going to do it? Were you really that excited? Well, yeah, maybe. Depends what it was, right? Would it appeal to a lot of people? Yeah, maybe. But I think a lot of people were missing the trick here, missing the point. The point was that with a new motorcycle, a cheaper, smaller bike, it opens up the market for them. It opens the gateway. It doesn't even open up. It cracks the door open so they can have a little sneaky look behind the curtain, as it were, to say, what's going on, right? Is this for us? Yeah, maybe. Let's just ease this one into the market here, see what the reaction is. Yeah, what about an American market? What about European market? Okay, well, maybe we could just push another one out. And this has always been my major criticism of Harley Davidson in terms of the Revolution Max engine bikes, because I think they crack the door open. I think they push through with the Pan America. I think they push through with the Sportster S and the Nightster and the Nightster Special. I think they tried to push through, I should say. Certainly with the Pan America they pushed through, and they continue. It's probably their most successful Rev Max bike, right? But they just haven't done enough. They haven't come with more bikes. They haven't come with more designs that gets people thinking, wow, this is a cool bike. Wow, I like that bike. Yeah, I could see myself on that. We ought to always talk about the Sportster, the old Sportster, right? Could they revive that? Other countries, other companies have made the Sportster again, in terms of their own version of it. It could be made. They've proven it could be made and sold. Harley Davidson missed the trick there. They definitely missed the trick there. And whether they sold the patents, whether they sold the tooling, the engineering, whatever it is, it's their desire not to want to make that kind of bike. So in terms of the Revolution Max engine bikes, they had the opportunity to make a bike in the as a nod, as a gesture to the Sportster. Doesn't mean it had to be called the Sportster or it was the Sportster reincarnated. But they could have made a whole line of bikes like that with the Rev Max engine bike. They could have redesigned it a little bit in terms of the aesthetics, certainly from the left-hand side of that bike or the left-hand side of that engine. They could have done something, but they didn't. It's almost like they peered through the curtain with the Rev Max. They pushed out a couple of bikes, and guess what? They closed the curtain. They said, right, that's enough. Close the curtain. That's enough of that. We're not having any more of that. Now, it could be that they've had a bit of backlash, of course. Of course, they could have had a bit of a muted response from their biggest market, the United States, that people not that interested. It could be that they've had a much more of a backlash since for 2025. They sent the production of those into Thailand. It could be that they've done that. I don't know what the latest is for those bikes, whether they're going to bring them back to United States in terms of the production in the United States, or whether they're going to continue those in Thailand. It could be a whole host of reasons, but they just haven't produced those bikes and developed those bikes into things that people want. Yeah, I know. They've got, in the United States, they've got the Nightster, the basic Nightster at $10,000. But still, you're going to pick up much cheaper bikes than $10,000. Not necessarily better bikes, but certainly, well, actually, no, you will. You will buy much better bikes for $10,000 or less, even half the price. That they will be used bikes, granted, but they'll be better bikes. So that's the problem. They've tried to open up new markets, but they haven't fully committed to it. It's like when you want to hit something, right? With not hitting somebody. I mean, if you want to hit a ball, right, with a bat, baseball bat, when you want to throw something, when you want to hit, if you're a boxer, I love boxing, right? When you want to hit, when you want to dig a hole, whatever it is, you've got to fully commit to it. Your body and your muscles have got to be committed to that action. Because if you don't fully commit to it, then you're likely to do an injury. You're likely to do yourself an injury, right? It's the same in sports, contact sports, football, American football, Football for us, which you guys in America would call soccer, right? You know, anything, rugby, anything like that. If you don't fully commit into that, you're more likely to get into an injury than not. You've got to do it, right? And this is where I feel that Harley Davidson are. They haven't fully committed, so they're actually doing themselves injury over and over again. And I just don't think that they're focusing on what they need to focus on. Whereas other manufacturers I see, they're doing the same thing. They're cracking open the door, they're pulling back the curtain, they're peering through like this, and they're going, okay, let me just push out a couple of bikes here. Let's just see what happens. Oh, yeah, good reaction there. Push out a couple more. Now, other manufacturers look at that and they think, well, actually, Triumph have just done that. BMW have just done that, and now they've brought out a 450. Actually, this 300 or 400 cc, 500 cc mark, that's like the golden ticket right now. Maybe we should be producing bikes. Guess what? Honda have always been accused of never really innovating, you know, and maybe just following the trends. But what Honda do that other manufacturers don't do or can't do, they identify where trends are and they identify where gaps in their markets are or gaps in the bikes that they produce. So let's just say a 500cc or 350, 400, 500cc. They had a big gap in their product lineup of that kind of cc range. Guess what? They start producing 350s. They start producing 400s, 500cc bikes. Guess what? They're big sellers. Triumph with their 400cc's. They're producing big bikes, producing those bikes and selling in big numbers. Harley Davidson with Indian motorcycle manufacturer Hero with their X440. I'm not saying the X440 in India is selling in big numbers, but it's substantial numbers. We are talking 30, 40, 50,000 units, I think, now. It could be more, it could be less. I don't know what the last figure is. So they do have the market, they do have the bike in certain markets to sell in big numbers. I have no idea what the market is in China and how many of the X350, X500 have been sold. I know they're being sold in Australia, but I don't think they're selling very many over there. But that's the problem. The problem with Harley Davidson in terms of certainly in other countries, certainly outside of India and outside of China, but this happens in India as well, where they're selling the Harley Davidsons more. You have to pay more for a Harley Davidson than you would a comparable bike. Well, this is certainly the case in Australia. Why would you buy, let's say, the X500 Harley Davidson that's been produced in China for whatever it is? Let me know. Let's just say, I'm making this figure up, but let's just say 10,000 Australian dollars, when you can buy a Benelli Leoncino 500, which is pretty much exactly the same bike, for about $6,000 or 7,000 Australian dollars. It makes no sense. Whilst you might love Harley Davidson as the brand, you're kind of going to look at that bike and say, well, that bike looks exactly the same as that bike. In fact, let me do a bit of digging here in terms of research. Yeah, they're pretty much the same bike. They're produced by the same people. Look, it's the same parts, or they look exactly the same. Why would I buy that when I want that? Unless you just want a small Harley Davidson, just to add to your stable, right? Mate, if that's what you want, that's fine. There's no problem. But you're going to pay extra for it. But you're not paying for the extra quality. You're not paying for the extra design sophistication here. You are just paying extra for the badge, right? And that's been labelled at Harley Davidson for a long, long time. They've been doing this for a long, long time. Other manufacturers for 2026, 2025 really, 2024 actually, some of them really started responding. 2025 really sort of hammered it down. August to November 2025, a lot of manufacturers are coming out and saying, look, these are the bikes we're coming out next year. Guess what? The trend is for sub 600 bikes, sub 600cc bikes. The market out the big, really expensive bikes is still there, but it's never going to be as great for the time being. We need to produce other bikes. And guess what? They have done. And they're coming out with cheaper and cheaper bikes. Now, obviously, for those in the United States or certain countries, maybe even from this country, I don't want a bike that's built in India or built in China or built in Japan or whatever. I want a bike that's built here in Europe or UK or, United America or whatever it is. That's fine. But if you want that, you're going to have to pay a lot more, but doesn't mean that it's better quality. And I've said this repeatedly in terms of Chinese bikes. Watch out for them, because they're coming and they're coming and they're coming, and they're just getting better and better and better until the question of quality, manufacturing quality, and the thing, all the things that are associated with that bike in terms of technology, in terms of, accessories, in terms of, comfort, build quality, performance, all that sort of stuff. It's not even an argument anymore. Yeah. Because they're going to produce these bikes that are just better and better, and you'll be looking at them going, this is a better buy. And so many people have already done it. I think in the UK, the Chinese brands are the biggest selling brand now. I think in Europe, all over Europe, bar 2 or 3 countries, I think they are very close. If not, they are the biggest selling brands now. So the Vogue 800, is it the Vogue 800 adventure bike? I think that is the biggest selling adventure bike all over Europe now. But you've got other brands like CF Moto. CF Moto selling loads of bikes. So you kind of think, well, 10 years ago, would you have even thought about these other bikes, these other brands? No, you'd be like, who are they? Never heard of them. A few years later, all of a sudden, people are starting to take note, and they're posing a very real problem for the well-established, traditional, older manufacturers. Major problems. And Harley Davidson and Indian, and the likes of BMW, to a lesser extent Triumph, because they've responded. If these manufacturers don't respond, they will be left behind. And it only takes a few years for this to really manifest itself in bankruptcy. It only takes a few years. When people suddenly start saying, do you know what have you done? I get a couple of, I've not only on my video, but I watched a few other videos of people reacting to chapter 2, the motorcycle reveal from Harley Davidson, right? In the comments, so many people just going, regardless of the tone of the video in terms of how positive people were, if the tone of the video is positive, it's going to attract a lot of positivity. If the tone is absolutely negative, it's always going to attract some negativity. But even in those positive videos, where some of those YouTubers will never say a bad word about Harley Davidson, right? Or criticize their bikes. They'll always see something good. And that's fine. If they're a fan, that's fine. I don't have an issue with that in particular. But it's interesting in the comments. Always read the comment section, because the way people react into it. And they say, Harley Davidson haven't done anything new. There's nothing new here. Where are the new bikes? So that was my question. My question was, where are the new bikes? Where are they? We've kind of been talking about it for a while, and we've been doing this song and dance with Harley Davidson for quite a few years now. Well, where are these new bikes? Where is this bike? Where is that bike? We thought we were getting this bike. That didn't happen. What's happening? Oh, we're going in this direction, are we? But what about all these other bikes that we thought we were going to get, that we thought was going to make Harley Davidson a really interesting contemporary brand? But no, it's not happening. Now these small CC bikes, are they going to happen? Or, 750 bikes, 800cc bikes, sub 1000 cc bikes. More refinement. Are we going to have that? Are we going to have more Rev Max bikes? Nothing. Zero. No information. I just find it really disappointing. Really disappointing. Frank says here, look, next Harley Davidson's next chapter is chapter 11. Bankruptcy. Could be. Could be. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below if you like what I do here. Listen, all I can say is keep on watching. Keep on watching. I'm never going to ask you to subscribe. I'm never going to ask you to like the videos. If you want to do that, that's great. I do these videos. I do these live shows just to put information out there and put questions out there. But obviously, you do all that stuff. You like and subscribe and share. That's great. It helps. Of course, it does. It keeps the lights on, it keeps the wheels moving, but it's more about whether you just like watching and you just want to engage in a conversation. We've all got opinions. Everybody's got an opinion, and everybody can have an opinion and have a discussion with somebody else about a certain topic, whether it's bikes, sports, politics, whatever it is. People love to get into the comments and start, sticking knives in and start trying to troll you down, and people do what you want to do. It doesn't bother me. But if you want to engage in a good conversation and a positive conversation, regardless if we all agree or disagree, but we can do that. But if people can't get themselves in a good conversation, then there's not going to be a conversation, is there? Really? So I that's what I always say, that some people love to be positive. That's fantastic. Some people just want to criticize and be negative in the comments as well, and be, let's say, derogatory or rude or whatever it is. As a YouTuber, because this is all I do really, as a YouTuber, well, if you post something that's negative or doesn't help, then I have a very low opinion of it. I don't read it. I don't care about it. It doesn't play on my mind. But my opinion of you is way, way down. So you're not doing yourself any favors by doing that. I welcome people to come in and enjoy and have a conversation and enjoy and add to it. But that doesn't mean that people have to agree with me. In fact, in many ways, you should disagree in many ways, because that's part of having this discussion, right? Even if you believe that I am a Harley Davidson hater, which I was once called by Matt Laidlaw, what an arsehole, I couldn't be further from the truth, right? But if you believe I am, then hey, you can always come on and have a conversation about it, and you'll find that I'm not. You'll find that actually we would, regardless of what we do or say, we would share values, we would share opinions. Most people just need to talk with each other. But I'm going off on a tangent. This is just my view on life. If people just talk to each other a lot more and just had open conversations, as opposed to hurling rocks and pointing fingers or trying to put people either into a binary situations, yes or no, hate or love, all this kind of. If you just talk to people, you probably find that everybody has very similar opinions on different aspects, right? Anyway, enough of that. But what do you think of the new bikes? What do you think are companies like Harley Davidson? This is not supposed to be just about Harley Davidson, but any motorcycle manufacturer. What do you think of it? Are they doing good stuff? Is it going to be a good year ahead? Are exciting times ahead? I think in some cases, yes, definitely exciting times. In other areas, I'm yet to be convinced. That's the question here. I'm still holding out hope that companies like Indian, Harley Davidson, and other manufacturers will produce something that I'll be like, this is really good. This is really good to talk about. This is really good to see. This is good that I want to ride it, right? This is all potentially I would like to buy it. So I'm still holding out hope. But anyway, if you like what I do here, as I say, keep on watching. Do anything that you want to do to help support the channel. And I'll come back with another video and hopefully another live show very, very soon. If you like these live shows and the ability to speak to me directly in real time with the chat, let me know in the comments